Hi folks, Florida Man here. Today, I'm bringing you an after-action report on a game I played on the classic map, as you might imagine on Play Diplomacy. The game was called The One Game to Rule Them All, and I took over a surrendered position. So, you know the typical drill by now. I will go over the game, how it went from an outsider perspective from the beginning, and then I'll talk about what I did once I joined. I played this game 2 years ago, so I will also try to talk about what I like to think I would have done differently if I played now. The game begins mostly with clearly drawn battle lines. England open to Norwegian Sea, North Sea, and Edinburgh, which is very anti-Russian and very trusting towards France. France and Germany open with a bounce in Burgundy, which is arguably a pointless exercise in guaranteeing they're secure against each other, but at least shows that they don't have mutual trust. This means England becomes the only one who could take Belgium in 1901. This is probably the best case scenario for an England who doesn't know who he wants to work with, or who wants to join up with France. All three of the Western powers appear set for 2 builds each, unless something odd happens. In the east, we see that Russia opened aggressively anti-Austrian, while Austria moved as if his biggest problem was Italy. I'll say simply, it's pretty clear Italy isn't Austria's biggest problem right now. And Turkey and Russia bounced in the Black Sea, while Turkey's other units moved toward Austria. So it looks kind of like we're seeing a juggernaut if I have to guess in the east. Going to fall, England messed up. He failed to enter orders. And he therefore ruined what was one of the stronger 1901 positions we could see for England. At the same time, Germany bounced Russia out of Sweden, ticking off Russia without having England as a reliable ally. France moved into Burgundy, a very threatening move now from the German perspective, and Russia expanded into Romania and Vienna, which Austria mistakenly chose not to defend. Austria remains fatally focused on the Italian threat. That does not necessarily pose as big of a threat as his moves would suggest. It might be fair enough to worry about Italy to some limited extent, but I suspect it's not going to have very good results here. Interestingly, Turkey tried to move into Romania. He actually took the Black Sea this season, and he moved Constantinople to Smyrna. So Turkey has just undone everything that made it seem as if he was allied with Russia. And now we don't have a clue if that might have been a ruse, or if he's actually working with Austria now. We don't know what's going on. Going to the build phase, we see Russia take advantage of the obvious English weakness by building a St. Pete North Coast fleet, and he also prepares for fighting against Austria or Germany with a Warsaw build. Turkey gets a very anti-Russian build in Ankara, while Austria gets a new unit in literally the only place he has open, Budapest. Italy opts for a new fleet in Naples, which I think might be an Italian 1901 build in 90% plus of games. Germany gets a new fleet and a new army, while France commits hardcore against Germany by only building armies. Frankly, with the English failure to enter orders, that's kind of nuts, but I admire the commitment to the plan. With spring 1902, we see England once again fail to enter orders, resulting in him being auto-surrendered. The good thing is that a new English player joins immediately. Not me. Which minimizes the damage to the balance of the game. Unfortunately for him and the other Western powers, this season sees Russia walk into Norway unopposed, and begin moving against Germany. However, it looks like Russia may have bitten off a little more than he could chew, because he's simultaneously losing ground in the south to Turkey, who invades Romania and positions to take Sevastopol as well. In the west, France goes full force against Germany, but it's easy to see coming, and it's just armies, so Germany just makes the logical moves to counter him. And without English help, France is going to have a difficult time overwhelming the German, who in this season acquired Belgium and Sweden. Last but not least, Italy moved into Tyrolia, while Austria used everything he had to defend his home centers and keep Russia at bay. In fall 1902, we see a whole lot of beautiful chaos with the new English monarch installed. He took Norway, which seemed to be by agreement with Russia, as that coincided with Russia supporting himself from Norway into Sweden. Germany pulled back into Denmark and entered the Baltic Sea, putting himself in a good position to hold off an invasion from Scandinavia for the moment. England tried a convoy to Belgium, which France supported, but they didn't have enough muscle to land it, because France's other nearby unit in Burgundy was busy supporting Italy into Munich. From my perspective, that's a good maneuver for France, and not such a great maneuver from Italy. But we'll see if he can somehow hold Munich against both the 4 French armies that I'm sure will have an interest in that center later, and the German units determined to reclaim their homeland. Speaking of Italy, he makes an unsupported move on Greece this season, but Austria saw it coming and bounced it. This was a bad moment for Italy to try attacking Austria in earnest again, since we see Austria has now retaken Vienna while Russia managed to reclaim Romania and lose Sevastopol to Turkey. I think the big winners of this year are England, France, Austria, and Turkey, while the big losers are Germany and Russia. Italy is also not exactly a winner in my view, since he only gained Munich, and Austria and Turkey will probably end up being a difficult challenge for him going forward. With the builds, Italy wisely gets another fleet, but he's matched by Austria getting a fleet. Turkey got a new army, and England got a London fleet, which seemed likely an anti-German decision. In spring 1903, we see a lot going on. France begins to make progress against Germany by taking Belgium, while Germany retakes Munich from Italy more quickly than I expected. Germany also supports himself into Sweden, but this is coupled with England walking into Skagerrak, which can only mean that Germany is about to be attacked from that side. Russia pulled out of Gulf of Bothnia and back into St. Pete, which I think indicates an agreement with England that he's going to leave things in Scandinavia alone in exchange for being left alone in Russia for a while. To the south, Turkey continues to expand against Russia by taking Romania again. This time, Russia's unit there gets destroyed, since it was a fleet. Russia has now pulled his other units into home centers to defend against the coming Austrian attack, and Italy just tries to get into the best defensive position he can with his fleets. In the retreats, we see Italy now occupies Berlin, while Russia stepped back into Finland in the north. You might see this as a good thing for Italy, but my suspicion is he's going to be distracted at a critical moment for his survival with a fight against Germany that he ultimately isn't equipped to win. As for Russia, maybe England will give him Sweden back? In fall, we see England did not in fact want Germany dead enough to let Russia have Sweden back, although supporting Russia in would have been a simple and expedient way to kill Germany a little more quickly. Italy retakes Munich with French support, which frankly might have been a waste of French resources. That army could have gone to Ruhr. In the south, Italy loses ground to Austria, as we've been expecting, who now occupies the Adriatic Sea. As long as Austria and Turkey seem to be on the same side, Italy is in a lot of trouble, and this season doesn't suggest any changes. Austria trades Turkey, Greece for Romania, which makes some sense given that Austria is a land power who will focus on Russia, while Turkey is going to be a Mediterranean naval power who has to go after Italy. In the builds, we see Germany destroyed his Berlin army because he perceived that England is more of a long-term threat to him than Italy, and Italy will be reluctant to advance further into Germany than Munich. France acquired a fleet in Brest, which seemed tantamount to a declaration of war against England. Turkey built a new fleet in Smyrna, which for me confirms his continued direction against Italy, and Russia destroyed the fleet in Finland, a decision that I think would be aptly described as a no-brainer. In spring 1904, despite France's seemingly anti-English build, we see he moves south to West Mediterranean, pulling his units toward a new front with Italy. The French player finally also gets himself into Ruhr, which would seem to me to be an obvious step in any plan to attack Germany. But whatever, better late than never. England takes Sweden from Germany, but at the same time, Germany takes Denmark back. And what's worse, he can hold it. All he has to do is support himself in place. This wouldn't be a problem if England had simply supported Russia into Sweden last year, but whatever. Let Germany take 10 years to die, it probably makes no difference. Russia failed to enter orders this season, but fortunately for him, it was just a season of Austria and Turkey repositioning against him, rather than an actual fatal mistake. Turkey is also advancing by creeping along the coasts toward Italy, which might give him a good shot at Ionian Sea, albeit probably not until next year. In fall, France moves to surround Tunis, and Turkey takes the Ionian Sea, which would seem to leave Italy in pretty bad shape. Italy decided to focus his entire force on Austria, which is quite a commitment. Let's see if it pays off for him. In the center of the eastern part of the map, Russia remains intact by virtue of simply supporting himself in place. In the west, Germany is actually doing very well against the anti-German alliance, holding his ground in Holland and retaking Sweden from England. This season, England failed to enter orders, and that's the actual problem, but the result is that Germany looks just as formidable now as he did before he lost Munich. In the retreats, England does enter an order, and Sweden retreats to Gulf of Bothnia. This puts all the English units except the army surrounding Sweden, so Germany certainly won't retain that, but now England has to worry about Germany moving into North Sea. With the builds, Austria gets a new army. In spring 1905, England does retake Sweden, and he also loses control of the North Sea, putting two of his home centers in potential danger. If I were Germany here, I would try a convoy onto the English island, because he's almost guaranteed to lose Holland to France now anyway. France marched into Munich this season, so he can tap Kiel and prevent Germany from supporting Holland in place, and there's no reason for France not to do that. Down south, we see France finally moves into Tunis, as well as taking a shot at Naples. Italy is in trouble. Russia finally begins to lose ground in his remaining centers. Austria takes Warsaw this season. But in fall, events in the west go very differently from what I would have expected. Instead of using North Sea as the conduit for a convoy onto the English island, Germany just moves North Sea into London, which is a very short-term sort of move, an inconvenience for England rather than a real challenge for the English player to overcome. This is coupled with England taking Denmark from him, as well as France taking Kiel. Germany is reduced to 3 centers that are not touching each other, which is generally a death knell. In the south, a bigger twist, France vacates Tunis in order to work with Italy against Turkey and retake the Ionian Sea, albeit that this was probably the wrong moment for that particular move. We see Turkey simply retreated into Naples, which allowed him to build a new fleet in Smyrna. France built a new fleet in Brest, England built a new fleet in Edinburgh, and you will note that Germany failed to either retreat or rebuild the army he'd had in Kiel. Russia destroys his St. Pete fleet, allowing him to try to hold on to Moscow a little bit longer, while leaving his northernmost center vacant temporarily. In spring 1906, England moves immediately to take advantage of this Russian weakness. Although with only fleets in the region, he can only get 1 center from these movements he's making towards St. Pete. Still, securing the stalemate line is important. In the main part of Germany, England and France work together to destroy the last army that defended Germany's remaining mainland centers. France also occupies Munich, although who knows if he'll remain there. He and Italy are still working together against Turkey in the south. Austria and Turkey positioned to guarantee Russia loses Moscow. In fall, England and France finally kill off Germany. To the south, France helps Italy reclaim Naples from Turkey. They lose Ionian Sea to the Austrian-Turkish alliance again, and Russia dies off just like the Germans. Interestingly, this season sees centers transferred to Turkey, but none to Austria. I wonder if that will be important. In the builds, we see France get an army in Marseille and a fleet in Brest, Turkey gets 2 new fleets, and England gets 2 new fleets too. In spring 1907, France attacks England. The build phase seemed to suggest they might square off, especially with the fact that England didn't need any more fleets, and the French choice to build in Brest again. Now that suggestion seems to be reality. To the south, Italy and France continue working together to stonewall Austria and Turkey. Turkey and Austria continue moving to attack the west, although we can also see a hint in the Turkish positioning and Austria's smaller size that Turkey may be getting into a position to quickly absorb him at some point. In fall, France surrendered, and I took over the surrendered position. I know what you're thinking. That took quite a while. I forgot you were going to join this game. You're right. It did. And I did. On the positive side, old France gifted me a pretty good position. On the negative side, I was dropped into 2 different wars, and I really hate 2-front wars, as you may know if you've been watching this channel for a while. I immediately made efforts to create peace with England, and repositioned to continue supporting Italy against the enemy in the south. You can see this season I attempted to support England convoying into Prussia, but the Austria-Turkey alliance bounced us. I'm very concerned about this because they are almost at the stalemate position they need to reach to prevent us from continuing to advance. I do take Venice for my southern friend this season, which I think in retrospect might have been less than prudent, because the Italian only has so many units to destroy. We see the Italian destroy was Adriatic Sea, which was a pretty nice unit to have, actually. My fleets are not behind enemy lines, and the Adriatic Sea unit was essentially in a position behind enemy lines. We see England and I both build armies this time, which hopefully means we're on the same page and don't want to fight. I would really like the English army out of Irish Sea, though. As long as that's there, Italy poses an obvious threat of a backstab. In spring 1908, we see why it's a real problem that Italy had to destroy that Adriatic Sea fleet. His position was more delicate than I must have realized at the time, and with Austria now slipping into the Adriatic Sea, it's unlikely that we'll ever hold that space or Ionian Sea ever again. England also loses St. Pete this season, which is a pure matter of clumsiness. England should never have to lose St. Petersburg to anyone after taking it, especially not an England who's in such a strong position in the west. But this England forgot to enter orders, so he'll have to retake it. In fall, we see England convoy into Scandinavia to prepare to retake that center, which is great, but he also moves into the mid-Atlantic Ocean, which is a little nerve-wracking, but hopefully that fleet will be there to help. The next several years are an exercise in pushing an enemy who's almost at the stalemate line backward, being pushed backward toward the line in turn, and ultimately driving the enemy off the edge of a cliff until I'm in an Austrian home center. At that point, I make an attempt to try for the solo, and I have a bit of success in advancing, including killing Austria off completely, but I am outnumbered by my opposition, both Turkish and English, who have a combined 6 units more than me, and they're in a position where they can fight me on both sides and use their units well together to pick off my centers. By the end of 1915, I can see that I'm not going to win this unless there's some seismic shift in the diplomacy of the game. I'm in position to lose Tunis, Rome, and ultimately the Austrian centers. The only centers I'm well positioned to take are Liverpool and maybe one other English home center, so I seem to have hit the high water mark of what I can do here. This is the final position, because here I agree to a 3-power draw. So what would I have done differently if I played this game today? Considering that I was playing with a rating shield, which means there's no significant negative consequences for losing, I think I might have tried to keep fighting despite my poor odds. I could have still soloed if I played better than my opponents, although I must say that my enemies are playing well for the entire game, so that's unlikely. I think maybe more effort to convince England that we would achieve a 2-way draw, or to convince Turkey of the same, might have made it possible to get to the solo. But these were not naive players. I doubt that a deceptive effort of that kind would have been successful. My big regret about this one is sort of abstract. It feels as if the French player who surrendered left me a really solid position for a change. I'm not quite happy about the conclusion because I played for half of the game by the time it was over, but I wasn't able to turn the solid position that I inherited from original France into a solo. Maybe you in the audience can tell me what I should have done differently or where you think I made my mistakes. I look forward to your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy these videos, I hope you will show it with a like, and by joining the roughly half of my viewers who are subscribed. And I also support putting your hands together for the thoughtful and generous people whose names now appear on screen, our wonderful patrons and translators. You too can join the Alligator Army by clicking the link to join my Patreon in the video description. You can gain access to a world of exclusive Diplomacy Podcast episodes and occasional videos that are only accessible through my Patreon, as well as early access to all YouTube content. I'd buy that for $1. Until next time, Florida Man, out.